So our next speaker that I'm pleased to present is Sara Traberman, representing Sensible Solar for rural New York. Sensible Solar is a nonpartisan grassroots organization formed by citizens concerned about Shepherd's Run solar facility, which is proposed for Copake, New York, and the organizers are glad that she was able to attend. Oh. Thank you. So, I don't know. I think this one's actually better.
Okay, and this is. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Sara Traberman, and I'm very glad to be here. I want to thank Betsy and Allison for inviting us to speak. We really appreciate the opportunity to tell you what's been going on in Copake with the proposed solar project. We also want to thank Daphne Jordan, our former senator. When in office, Daphne was very supportive of our cause, and we truly appreciate that. And I'm not sure if Gunner's here from Dee Dee Barrett's office. Dee Dee has been very supportive of us as well, so thank you. Before I get into the presentation, I just want to tell you a little bit about who I am. I live in Craryvale with my husband and 2 dogs. I've been living there since 2012. We love the area because it has so much to offer. We ski, we hike, garden, and just really enjoy the peace and quiet. I have 2 grown children, and I recently became a grandmother, which is absolutely wonderful. I retired 2 years ago after 40 years as a banker, and that's when I joined Sensible Solar. Since becoming involved with Sensible Solar, I've made a lot of new friends and met a lot of new people. So as frustrating as our fight has been, at least something good has come out of it. And I've learned that this is a very special place with wonderful people, and it's definitely worth fighting for. I'm here today to tell you about our group and also to talk about Shepherd's Run, which is the 60 megawatt industrial scale solar energy facility proposed for the town of Copake. I'll be talking about the major issues that we see with the project and why New York State laws and policy regarding this project are a problem. So who is Sensible Solar? The group was formed around 2019. We're a grassroots, nonpartisan group of private citizens who came together because we had a lot of questions about Shepherd's Run, and we weren't really getting clear answers. From the beginning, and I'll say this again, we've acknowledged that climate change is a serious problem and that development of solar is part of the solution. But we grew concerned that this project was coming together in Copake. It seemed to be much more about maximizing profits for the developer and not so much about respecting our local community and laws. We wanted to get the facts and not just accept the PR talking points that we were given. It seemed to us that New York State had flung open the door to private developers without a master plan in place to guide the development and therefore protect rural communities where most of these projects are going to be built. Really what's happening is a green gold rush, with private developers running around grabbing as much land as they can so they can take advantage of laws that benefit them and maximize their profits, and again, at the expense of rural communities. We spent a lot of time early on raising awareness, and when this project first started getting going, it was right around the time of COVID, so it was a scary time. People were just focused on COVID, so a big task of ours was getting people's attention and getting the word out about the project. In our conversations with people, they told us they were concerned about protecting the things that those of us who live in the community really value, and that's farmland, natural resources, wildlife, the Taconic watershed, and our tourism-based economy. And Sensible Solar strives to be a voice for those concerns. Copake, like most towns, have enacted a comprehensive plan as well as a farmland protection plan, and this was back in 2011 and 2014, before this project even got started. These plans both talk about the importance of protecting farmland and open space, planning and directing development away from these resources, and preserving the town's rural character. This is what's important to the people of Copake, and everything Sensible Solar does is 100% in support of the town and these goals. We think local laws must be respected. I think we all know that New York is a home rule state. This means that localities have the right to exercise control over matters of local concern. Yep. For example, zoning limits. that preclude development from happening in certain areas. The state should not override those laws for renewable energy projects, but they do. We're fighting to make sure New York State takes local interests seriously. So now I'll tell you a little bit about the project. In a nutshell, it's a proposed 60-megawatt industrial-scale solar energy project. It will fill an entire valley in Craryville. It will have 220,000 motor-driven solar panels on 265 acres. The private for-profit developer is Hecate Energy, based in Chicago and owned by Repsol, which is Spain's national oil company. The project will be sited on prime farmland, which will be removed from use for the life of the project. In fact, 85% of the project footprint is agricultural land, with mineral soil groups 1 through 4 comprising about half. And these are highly productive soils according to New York State Ag and Markets. The plan calls for clear-cutting 40 acres of forest on a very visible hillside. The entire project is sited within the Taconic watershed. The Taconic Creek is part of the watershed and is the source of drinking water for the city of Hudson. Within the watershed are 21 wetlands and 9 protected streams, all of which are protected by either the DEC or the EPA, and are subject to Clean Water Act restrictions. Yet the developer plans to place underwater electrical cables that will be built by something that they call horizontal directional drilling. The project will come right up to the football field of the Taconic Hills School, the access routes into Copake Lake, which is an important tourist spot and recreation area, and to the border of the 1,000-acre protected Rhinestrom Hill Audubon Society. To continue on, this isn't really just one solar field, it's 7 separate solar fields. It sprawls across highways, around roads, through neighborhoods, up hillsides, and around streams and creeks. All the blue areas on this map that you see are wetlands that are protected. The town has a law that says you can't build within 100 feet of water, but the developer wants that waived so they can put in more panels and drill underneath for their underwater cables. The project borders over 100 homes and local businesses. On the map, there are little circles, you probably can't really see them, but if you look at the map out at our tables, you can see it. The Taconic Hills School is the oval on the left, and you can see the panels in gray that come right up behind it. There are at least 10 identified historic properties on the site, 4 of which are eligible to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And as part of this application process, the New York State Office of Historic Preservation weighed in and made a determination that the project would have an adverse impact on these 4 properties. Doesn't matter. The site will surround the Niver Cemetery on Route 23. This cemetery is one of the oldest in the county and contains the graves of Revolutionary War soldiers. There's also an historic site connected with the Mohican Indians within the project area. The bottom line is you'd be hard-pressed to find an area that is less conducive to putting in a solar facility. So why did Hecate choose this location? Basically 2 reasons. One, most of the acreage is controlled by one owner, and that parcel sits across the street from the substation that's in Craryville. It's convenient for the developer, and it means it's cost-effective for the developer. That's why they chose the area. So what's wrong with this project? I hope you can see there's a lot wrong with it. And the way we feel about it is there are no benefits and only negatives. Let's start with jobs. There will be no new permanent jobs created. The developers love to come into town and say, oh, all these jobs are being created. All the construction will be done by out-of-state contractors. And when the construction is over, there's maybe 1 full-time job, taking care of this facility. And usually they split between a couple facilities. The town won't receive additional revenue either, since New York State has decided to offer tax breaks to developers for green energy projects. We have another speaker who will talk more about this, but basically these arrangements replace local property taxes with payments at a reduced rate, and that's decided in Albany. It's basically a state giveaway to out-of-state developers, and it takes money away from local governments that are forced to accept these projects. We're not benefiting from local electricity rates either. The 94C regs contain a formula for an energy credit to households But the way we calculate that credit, it'll work out to less than $25 per household per year. It's nothing. Property values will go down. Logically, it makes sense because there's a big difference between looking out your window and seeing farmland and pasture and looking out your window and seeing glass and steel. And there are actual studies that have supported that homes and businesses next to these facilities lose value. The project violates town zoning. The entire project is within the agricultural and rural residential area, which limits the size of commercial developments like this. All told, Hecate has requested relief from 18 local laws, and for all of those violations, their explanation as to why they should get a waiver is that either it will cost more money for them to comply, or if they comply, they won't be able to build the project. Okay. Another problem is that this project will hurt the local economy, which depends on agriculture and tourism. Those are Copiague's two big attractions, and industrial solar retracts from both of them. To continue on with what's wrong with this project, the project removes hundreds of acres of the most productive farmland. It's the best farmland. And then there's talk about, well, we're not really taking the farmland away because in 20 years when the project is over, we're going to decommission the whole project and everything will just go back to being farmland. Okay, first of all, that's not happening. What farmer is going to wait around for 20 years so they can go back to farm the land? And my question is, in 20 years, aren't we still going to need renewable energy? So why would we be taking these panels away and putting it back to farmland? It doesn't make any sense. Once the project goes in, it's not going to be farmland ever. To connect the solar panels to the grid, the developer has proposed drilling directly under wetlands and streams. We're concerned about impacts to water flows and the aquifers that supply our wells. The plan calls for clear-cutting 40 acres of trees on hillsides and leveling the hills because the developer needs more acreage to meet its 60-megawatt goals. We question how the project will impact soil erosion and sediment runoff into waterways, especially when the hills are going to be leveled. All these lands will be surrounded by fencing, which then impacts wildlife habitats, migration paths, and breeding areas that are critical to maintaining a key wildlife passage in the Northeast. And we'll have to deal with a year of construction that'll take place over 300 acres with the building of access roads and staging areas. It will be a mess. Once the construction is over, we're going to have buzzing inverters and motors that continuously move the panels to face the sun. This noise will definitely have an impact, and we've actually written a letter asking many questions about the developer's noise and vibration analysis, and of course, we've gotten no answers. And needless to say, the project changes our scenic views forever. No one will ever be removing all that glass and steel. What concerns me and what's happened a lot when we talk about these issues is basically we're told solar is wonderful and there's nothing to worry about and it's perfectly safe and we shouldn't have a problem with this. Well, here's a real-world example that things can and do go wrong with solar installations. What you're looking at on the left is the Chattahoochee River in Chambers County, Alabama. This picture came from an article in November 2022, and this was actually covered by a lot of the media. A private developer named AL Solar was building a large solar installation nearby, and during the construction, sediment that had been taken from the land had washed into nearby waterways. This caused problems with the drinking water in a nearby town, which had to clean all that mud out of the water supply before sending it to their customers. All of this was discovered by an environmental watch group called Chattahoochee Riverkeeper. After 4 years of investigations, the U.S. Department of Justice and the EPA settled with AL Solar over their violations of the Clean Water Act, and AL Solar paid fines. And there were settlements with 3 other solar developers at the same time that were doing similar things. And here's what the EPA said about it. You could see the quote on the top. These settlements send an important message to the site owners of solar projects that these facilities must be planned and built in compliance with all environmental laws, including those that prevent the discharge of sediment into local waters during construction. So as I had mentioned earlier, This project, Shepherd's Run, is on the source of the drinking water for the Hudson City Reservoir. If you look at the map on the right, you can see the project is the big red, looks like a shoe. And then on the left-hand part, all the way down in the corner, that shows where the Taconic Creek intake is for the reservoir for the city of Hudson. And this is why we're concerned about impacts to the water. So now that you know about the project, I'll talk a little bit about the permitting process. The permitting process for larger renewable energy projects was created as part of the 2020 budget package during the Cuomo administration. The law is known as 94C. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about 94C, but there are some really important points worth noting. First of all, we know that the state had assistance from consultants to renewable energy developers in drafting the regulations, so they naturally are very developer-friendly. The regulations effectively take away all manner of local input and decision-making and hands it to a single office, the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, which reports to the governor. It's called ORES. ORES gets to make all the decisions. They can ignore local laws in deciding whether to grant a permit, and they are unresponsive to local concerns. 94C overrides the basic right of municipalities to adopt local zoning laws that they deem appropriate and substitutes the judgment of individuals who neither reside in nor are familiar with our town. As part of the application, the developer notes which local laws they'll be violating with the project, and then they explain why that should be okay or can't be helped. Usually the reason is that it would be too expensive to comply, or the developer would have to reduce the size, or they would just have to abandon the project because they wouldn't be able to build it if they had to comply with these laws. And I mentioned, I think earlier, Hecate has asked for the waiver of 18 local laws. So ORES can decide that the law is unduly burdensome and waive it for the developer. So far, ORES has not turned down any project applications under 94C. So clearly, the goal is to just approve as many projects as possible, as quickly as possible, with little regard for the impacts on local communities. As I mentioned before, property taxes paid by the developer are decided by the state, not the local community, and this just deprives local towns of needed tax revenue. ORES is not required to respond to public questions or comments. In the case of Sensible Solar, we've written many letters and posted questions on the project website about the water, about the historical buildings, about the noise. We've asked a lot of questions. We've even pointed out errors in Hecate's application and inconsistencies. We never get a response, and it's not required. They don't have to. Bottom line, the point of 94C was to fast-track applications and impose the will of the state on local communities in order to build these projects faster. To us, it seems New York State cares more about private for-profit developers than it does for its own citizens. So I hope by now you can understand why we're concerned about this project. Fortunately, though, in the last 2 months, the City of Hudson, the towns of Copiague, Hillsdale, Taconic, and Claverack, and just last week, the Columbia County Board of Supervisors have all passed unanimous resolutions opposing the Shepherd's Run project, at least until there are further guarantees that water quality will not be affected. We are so appreciative to have our neighbors support us like this. We're all concerned about impacts to our water from this project. Hecate has not properly addressed the Taconic Headwaters Conservation Plan, which seeks to preserve this area from damage and to protect clean water. This plan came out last fall. It was put together by local towns and Columbia Land Conservancy with a grant from the DEC. Here's the map I showed you a few slides back, and you can see the headwaters boundary is shown in the map, outlined in red, and the Shepherd's Run project, which is the red blob in the middle within the circle, it sits right in the middle of the watershed. We've asked ORES to force Hecate to address this plan in their application, but of course, we have no authority in the process. And we should remind you that the developer has announced that it will sell off the project, definitely at a profit, and walk away. So who will we be dealing with to make sure all promises are kept? let alone remediating the site at the end of its 20-year life. While we live with the impact of all this, the developer walks off with profits, and we're left with an environment forever changed. So where we stand with the town of Copiague and oppose Shepherd's Run as currently proposed because it's enormous, it's poorly sited, it overrides home rule and town authority, it conflicts with all our local conservation plans that were done before the project came around. It will result in the industrialization of our rural landscape, which nobody wants. And by the way, we've generated close to 400 comments posted to the DPS project website, and they are overwhelmingly against the project as currently proposed. Not to mention the 4,700 plus signatures we have on a change.org petition opposing the project. We see no benefits and only negatives with this project. Hecate will be the winner with big profits, courtesy of New York State. So what needs to happen? New York must honor home rule and respect upstate towns' priorities. Local zoning and planning exists for a reason and has a long history that should be respected. The permit application process is flawed and it must be changed. New York can and must do better to find balance to meet the energy needs of its citizens. ORA's having sole authority is problematic. ORA's reports to no one but the governor and can override local law. More emphasis is needed on community protection. Communities are powerless to protect what they value under these laws. If New York State was really serious about climate change and community protection, rather than throwing open the door to the chaos of private developers proposing whatever they think will make them the most money, the state should create a statewide master siting plan that protects farmland, water, historic properties, and neighborhoods from these bad developments. So we urge you to stay informed. We're thankful that you're here, and don't take private developers' assurances that they're doing good. It's a lot of PR about making money. Stand with your local leaders, not Albany. You know what is best for your community. And we must voice our concerns to political representatives in ORAs, but most loudly to our elected state assembly members and senators who should be guiding this process and enacting proper oversight of these developments to protect local communities. Finally, just so you have an update on what's happening with Shepherd's Run, we expect to hear from ORAs this week. Hecate's latest application was filed January 27th, so this week ORAs should be responding with either a draft permit or they'll decide that the application is incomplete. That would be for the third time because Hecate had problems with the first two submissions. But we'll know something this week. Thank you very much for listening, for your support. I look forward to your questions. Feel free to visit our table. I have some of my other members are here, and we'd be happy to speak to you.